Greetings, everyone. Welcome to another Brony Debates Live. I hope you're all doing well out there. We're going to have a lovely Saturday evening talking about a very unusual sort of topic, one of the heavier topics that we've had on this show. I'm ready for it, though. I'm not going to, bring me the controversy. I like the controversy. So I see Trent saying technical difficulties in the chat. No, there were no technical difficulties. I just lost track of time for a second. I'm sorry about that. Anyway, this one was ChucklyFun's suggestion from a little while ago, and or Snackle Fox. But yeah, our friend ChucklyFun here is getting into VTubing. He's been doing it for a couple of months now. I've just got to set up this VTuber rig. But anyway, ChucklyFun, what made you want to suggest this topic?
I had been on Quora a while ago, and one of the guys who is somewhat conservative on there, a little bit of a rarity on Quora, was talking about his own experience as a kid getting to do different interesting jobs and how that added to his education and his work ethic. So I was like remembering back to that, and I was remembering back to a lot of other education problems that we've had over the years in our own like actual education system. And I was tying a bunch of things together, and I remembered, oh yeah, all that stuff would be a good topic for a debate to bring up and examine. Hey, maybe we can rethink some of this.
Interesting. And joining us for this is Morningstar, or as he rebranded recently to Reis. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right. Could be better. Could be worse.
Alrighty then, yeah. And you were telling me earlier today you've got a little bit of experience with this topic as well. So before we really get into it, let's give a shout out and a thanks to all of the patrons that monetarily support the channel, make all of this possible. We are very grateful, especially to the $10 and up tier, such as Heather Blossom, Shady Oak, Sid McConroy, Autoknight, Emerald Spencer, Senko, DJ, Rein-Kun, Pony Cordero, QFlash, Billy Henline, Alden MacManx, EasyModeGamer, Kanto Acrylic VA, Mr. Sonic 31, Ridge the Hedgehog, Alicia Lynette, Zeta Z, Sniper Nighter, Calbeck, StarChaser, VentureCorp, and Dark Malcontent, executive producer of Titan Art Studios. If you'd like to get on the show, we'd love to have you. As little as $1 a month on your choice of platform gets you in the Discord server where you suggest topics, play games, get on the show, all that fun stuff. And be sure to check out everybody else's content in the description. They make some pretty good stuff as well. Now then, so Chuckly, you were saying you were talking about child labor laws in more terms of things like work study in an educational sense. Would you like expanding on that for me, please?
Yeah. So the guy on Quora was named Charles Tips, and he's an old guy, which a lot of the people in Quora are. And he was talking about his experience. Like his dad set him up with like, hey, go work in like this like medical lab or research place or something like that. And number one, get around the people doing actual work that you might eventually do someday. Number two, learn how to be responsible, learn how to clean things up, learn how to walk around a lab, and learn how to like talk the talk that these guys are talking around the lab. So work experience, we usually think of child labor as being kind of the opposite of work experience, oddly enough. We usually think of sending kids to work in the fields or in the mines or something like that, where they're explicitly not getting an education. But this guy, as a kid, was literally being sent to a place of high learning where the people around him were all educated, and he was getting a different type of education there. There's a bunch of other advantages here, but that was kind of the original motivation that I had to bring this up.
Interesting. So, and Reis, or you know what? Which name are we using tonight?
Just use Ray.
Ray. Okay, so Ray.
So much easier.
Ray Romano. Tell us about your experience with this topic.
Well, back when I started high school, my dad was paying my tuition at the high school I went to by working as the custodian for the church that the school was in. And pretty much what he did was clean all the buildings, set up from school to church and then back up to the school every week. So I helped him out, and
Okay.
he paid me to help him.
Interesting. All right. So that, and you had said earlier today that you talked about it a lot with your father.
Yes.
Can you tell us about that?
So we discussed certain laws and stuff that allowed younger children to work in certain environments, depending on how it was, who ran the business, and so on and so forth.
Okay.
And we
So,
discussed kind of if that was a good idea or not.
and what was the takeaway that you got from that?
It depends. If you'd both agreed that it's only a good idea if the child wants to work, as long as the work isn't so demanding that it could put the child's life at risk.
Yeah, which isn't difficult to do, especially in a lot of blue collar work. I mean, shoot, adults are putting themselves at risk all the time. Like, I'll tell you this here. Since April, I've been working in a construction trade. I'm pre-wiring data cables for houses for new constructions. And sometimes I have to retrofit these things, which means I've got to run a new wire through the house, which means cutting up the drywall, cutting up the ceiling, climbing through the attic. And that is tough, especially in a Floridian summer. I could not imagine. I mean, I can barely do it myself. I consider myself decently tough. I wouldn't send a kid up there. Now, the whole reason we have child labor laws is exactly what Chuckly was referring to at the beginning of the stream, is because during the Industrial Revolution, especially the American one and the European one, kids were getting exploited. I don't know what exactly they thought the justification was, but people liked hiring kids because they just straight up didn't have to pay them as much. They could also, the excuse of, they could fit in tighter spaces like the mines was often given, or the mine shafts. They were worked just as hard as the adults,
if not
and
harder.
yeah, it was and it was really bad, and there were kids suffering with spinal injuries at extremely young ages, and a lot of them died or had really bad working conditions. You know something though, is something I learned recently is my nonno, that is the Italian word for grandfather, by the way. My grandfather was one of those kids. Like, apparently he was working in construction ever since he was 9 years old, and that was roughly around the time he started smoking. And the reason he took up smoking at 9 years old was because smokers got smoke breaks.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So go for it. Go for it, Ray.
I was gonna say, when me and my dad were discussing this, I was doing a lot of research, and I actually found, like I said, there are a bunch of there are loopholes pretty much to the child labor law. For example, if you open your own business and you have a kid, you can make them work for you.
Mm-hmm.
Like one of the places I worked at, the owner's daughter, like she was like 8, 9, somewhere around there, would come and help out bringing boxes in and stuff for deliveries. But she wanted to do that. She wanted to help.
Yeah,
it's different than forcing them to help you.
And that raises like moral questions there, because technically you could have the kid work for you, but if the kid doesn't want to work for you, at what point does it become abusive to your own child? Now, there's a couple of things I see in the chat here that I wanna get at here, because our friend Zeus says, careful with definitions tonight, guys, and I definitely agree with that. The definitions are going to be very important. And then further up from that, Paladin Pony T said, we're talking about apprenticeships. So, Chuckly, what's the difference in your mind between an apprenticeship before it crosses over into child labor as specifically what it's defined in by the law and the reason for the child labor laws that we have?
So, unfortunately, I don't know the laws nearly as much as the other people on this channel. The guy that I was following said that you couldn't do the stuff that he did today, but it wasn't entirely clear what all the laws were, and it's also not entirely clear if all of them are laws. There might be other forms of restricting kids from working. An example there, a lot of jobs require a generic college degree. A lot of kids do not have a college degree at all yet, of course. But like the stuff that the guy in the example did probably would require a college degree today, but he was like about like 10 or 11 when he was doing that job. And hey, he was doing stuff that did not require a college degree. It's required now probably because they want to put other restrictions in place, but they're not allowed to. So it's just a way of filtering out people that they don't want to deal with.
What kind of people do they not want to deal with, do you think?
This is kind of a philosophy that came from a completely different discussion, but it would be like, hey, they're currently forced to like abide by a bunch of like gender discrimination, race discrimination, all those types of laws. And if they rejected somebody for reasons and somebody was black or whatever, they might be able to claim that they were being discriminated against. Now, the company might have a reasonable reason to discriminate on them, but they still might be in danger of a lawsuit. So they can just put up unreasonably high restrictions on employment, maybe including college degrees and other things, and just point at that and say, I'm sorry, you don't fit the bill. Now, that reduces, they still might have to deal with some issues, but it would theoretically reduce the amount of trouble that they would get in or number of problems they'd have to deal with.
Okay. Ray, what do you think about that?
So apprenticeships and jobs doing that is definitely a big thing with that. Like he mentioned, they want to filter out the people they specifically don't want to hire. But with apprenticeships, it can't. There's a fine line, especially in the law, when it comes to an apprenticeship, because an apprenticeship is pretty much they're teaching you a trade. For example, if you were the owner of a construction company and you hired me to be your apprentice, pretty much my job is to follow you around and learn what you do. You can work with that with a younger child too, but again, it has to be somebody you are related to, and you have to compensate them as equally as you would me for an apprenticeship. And again, you have to be careful with it because you can't overwork them, and you can't do anything that would violate the child labor laws, because they do protect the children in those circumstances, but the loophole is there to allow the child to work.
Okay.
So trades tend to be the more dangerous jobs, like Brawny was mentioning earlier. There might be exceptions, and there might be some trades where the kid could work, but I'm not that interested in like arguing kids should be working dangerous jobs as part of this like debate. Like, hey, maybe that could be something we could discuss on as like, hey, things we need to be wary about, but it's not that interesting for me to argue for that.
So here's the thing, though. I think that's an important question to ask when we're having these conversations, because I have lived long enough to see the slippery slope fallacy be proven to not be a fallacy. in that anything that, anytime you can, you should take the question of what could happen to its logical extreme, because it is very likely that it could reach that extreme if it goes unchecked.
Yeah,
right? So it's
but also probably the most common job that young people do today is lawn maintenance. Like, if you want to be able to go out and earn some money and you want to be able to, like, hey, actually earn some money, your parents probably kick you out and say, go mow somebody's lawn, assuming that you can get to, like, some neighborhoods that need it. Like, and lawn maintenance is not safe. It's kind of like on the edge of the trades in terms of, like, hey, you're dealing with blades, you're dealing with electricity, you're dealing with ladders, you're dealing with cutting tools. Like, it's probably like on the middle end of the trades or the low end, but still, like, this is what kids are being asked to do almost every time they have to go out and get a job. If we open this up reasonably, we could be opening up safer jobs than the typical lawn maintenance one. Like,
so are you talking about like well, give me some more ideas of what sort of fields you're talking about that are safer.
Well, I think somebody mentioned, like, tech in the examples. There are a lot of tech jobs that are rather safe. Like, hey, you've got all of the intern stuff that people do. You've got some very basic, like, data entry jobs. You've got a lot of, like, beginner programming jobs, which, hey, there are a lot of kids who are begging to learn this stuff. They can do some of the basic stuff. They can act as an assistant to review stuff. There are a lot of jobs that people do, which you might be able to train them up really quickly on, and they don't have to be working essentially like lawn maintenance or electrical or whatever. Like,
same thing goes for retail too. A lot of kids, like I said, that girl that worked with the owner that I worked for, she wanted to. I mean, she was gonna inherit his store when they passed. You know, she would inherit the store, and so she wanted to learn how to run it, to work at the store so she could learn to run it one day. Or when I worked up in Michigan, I knew the owner's son. She told me that he started working there when he was 14, and now he practically runs at least 2 of the stores.
Yeah, a lot of service retail jobs work here too. Harimon's throwing a bunch of them into chat. Stocking, service at gas stations, a bunch of this is not necessarily dangerous. Like, it could be done by kids. Probably the biggest issue you're getting into there is going to be minimum wage. They'll have to be paid like an adult, I guess, Reis was saying.
There is a stipulation to the law that allows you to pay somebody under 18 a set amount. I forget what it is, but there's an amount less they can pay than minimum wage to people.
And for some reason, you can underpay handicapped people too, which that makes absolutely zero sense to me.
It makes sense to me.
How does that make sense? Hang on a second. Let's sidetrack further. How does that make sense?
So you can currently, for example, just completely off topic, and then we'll get back to it. You can currently make a very small living on Twitch or YouTube or anything like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you get better, you can earn more. But starting at a low wage, doing that doesn't preclude you from earning a higher wage as you get better. You need to get your foot in the door. You need to prove yourself. If people are hesitant to pay you the full wage, like, I would not be paying somebody the full wage to start streaming most of the time, because they're going to be terrible at it. And I have no guarantee that they'll ever get better, and firing somebody is a mess. So if somebody can come in, prove themselves, hopefully they'll get better. Maybe they have some other way to support themselves. Like, hey, they don't need to be earning enough to support a family or enough to support an apartment if they're living with a relative and they just want something to do. Maybe they're actually so handicapped that they can't do much, and you're basically doing them a charity to hire them on for a couple of dollars an hour.
And here's another thing. They can only do that for 90 days, and you have to be under the age of 20. So if you are 20 years or younger, for the first 90 calendar days for any non-agriculture job, you can be paid $4.25 an hour.
Yeah, that sort of misses
first 90 calendar days.
All right, so you sort of answered my question of why we would pay a kid less, like a child less than minimum wage, is because supposedly they don't need to, they don't need to support an entire family.
Yeah,
I think that's just going to encourage more of what we saw during the Industrial Revolution and how dangerous that was.
so you're saying that paying kids less would encourage them to take on jobs that actually would require them to be paid more in general? Like, if people are going to be taking on...
I think it will eventually, I think something like that would eventually lead to kids being put in more dangerous situations because companies are now motivated to have it. They have a financial incentive to hire more children for more jobs because they have this loophole where they can pay them less.
Well, I do want them to be able to compete.
Now, something you had mentioned earlier, something you had mentioned earlier was about tech jobs, and I have a question about that, but I'll let you finish what you were about to say.
Okay. I would like the kids to be able to compete. Like, really, I'd also get rid of minimum wage for everything else, and I'd like them to be able to compete too. But from what I hear, the minimum wage can be reasonably competitive sometimes, at least in our area. I'm not sure. Like, a lot of people are getting paid over minimum wage already, so there aren't many people actually being paid at minimum wage. At least it's a little bit over it, which means that it's not the bottom amount that companies are willing to pay.
Mm-hmm. So here's the thing about minimum wage is that it was designed, its explicit original intention was to be that you could support a family on this wage, or at least support, at the very least, comfortably support yourself with like 10% left over, something like that. So you can put
it
into
definitely
savings.
does not do that anymore.
No, and it hasn't for a very long time. But that was, and the reason why we had that in place, and that also came with the labor reform, that hey, you couldn't pay your employees with
Crackers.
company dollars, the monopoly money, the company's currency. You had to pay them in actual American money. For the same exact reason of it, they ultimately there is this power dynamic, right? And if you get these mega corporations run by psychopaths that just want literally the entire world and just to own everything and get off on that feeling of power, they will take that if they have the ability to. These labor laws and minimum wage is supposed to curtail that kind of thing. So even though when you get down into, like I can totally see and even to a certain degree sympathize with the argument that minimum wage makes business harder to run and things more expensive, right? I can understand that to a certain degree, but it's there for a reason. And those reasons are written in blood. So we don't get situations like the Industrial Revolution and the Great Depression anymore, where you work for a full day and then you starve to death.
Sounds like we should make the minimum wage a future debate. But if anybody has the freedom to ignore a job offer, it's kids. Like, they're being supported already in most of the cases we're talking about by their parents, or otherwise they wouldn't have a job at all. So their alternative is, hey, work a low-paying job or don't work at all.
I was
like, that's the idea for the debate here. We're not arguing that suddenly they're going to be taken advantage of because they're being forced into a job. Because right now they're not working one at all. That is their alternative.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing, right? I think giving a child the chance to work if they want to is a great idea. And I think paying them what they're worth and being able to pay them a little less until they learn how to do it just as much as an adult can is a great idea as well. Because it incentivizes them. You say, hey, I'm only going to pay you this much, but when you learn how to do it, I'll pay you just as much as I'd pay any adult, you know? Because you're going to do the same thing for an adult that doesn't know how to do it, that's doing an apprenticeship. You don't know how to do this, so I'm going to pay you this much, and then when you learn how to do it, I'll pay you how much I pay the rest of everyone else. The child doesn't have to take that opportunity. Just as no one else does. And that's one of the biggest problems. People expect more for the skills they don't have.
So earlier, Chuckly had mentioned things like tech, and I'm going to use the word apprenticeship, right, and get them working in there. I feel, and he said, okay, so that's not dangerous, and I think what he meant was physically dangerous. I think it could be dangerous in other ways that I wouldn't necessarily trust a child with, or even, you know, it would only take. It would only take one immature teenager playing a prank to bring down $1 million company or so, you know, something like that while he's on the job or learning, or it wouldn't even have to be a prank. It could be any sort of mistake, and that's, as a business owner, I wouldn't want to do that. But that it has nothing to do with necessarily the law. So
Can I ask exactly what you... Okay, so you're saying normally kids are... The thing that we were talking about earlier was the kids are in dangerous situations to them, but now you're saying, hey, if you're in tech, what if that child becomes a danger to the company?
Yeah, and that could, I feel like that's, I mean, I know it's sort of tangentially related to the question, but I feel like that's a question. I feel like that would be more of a liability. I wouldn't trust a kid in a situation like that. And any halfway decent STEM school is going to run simulations on that kind of thing that are going to be comparable to any real world experience there. So I don't think that would really work in the way that you think it would.
There are lots of technologies in place to protect companies from whatever idea you're thinking of. A lot of them are lax on them, but they're certainly possible. So I don't see that as a big problem. Like version control, login security, they can track what you're doing at work and everything you've done with all your logins and passwords and everything.
Ray, what are you trying to say?
I was gonna say with tech jobs like programming, stuff like that, you don't have to necessarily give the child the job that could put the security at more risk. And yes, he is right. There's a bunch of security measures in place to prevent that. But you could always give the child a job that lets you work with it and learn how to do it without necessarily putting the company's security at risk. Like programming, you can have them just do some sections in it, you know?
Okay. So I'll take the L on that point. That was a I had a concern, and then it broke down halfway through. So I'll just take the loss on that point. But there is one more that we mentioned retail, and I know that a couple people in the chat were talking about retail would be good, and yeah, we do see like 16-year-olds working in retail. When did I start working in retail? My first job was I was mowing a family friend's lawn. And I started doing that at 14, and then at 16, I started working in a farm supply store. So yeah, we do have kids working there, and those are technically not usually as dangerous. Let me tell you this though, I
Ah,
would not want to put a kid into retail with the culture that we have in this country. Um, People get straight up abusive in retail and fast food and things like that, and
Oh,
that could
don't I
be.
know it?
I think that's a really high probability of doing some real psychological damage. So I wouldn't like. I don't know. I'm also sort of the mentality that literally nobody should work in food service or retail right now until they get paid a living wage. But
I
that's a
definitely agree. They need to fix the living wage. Again, we can
like
discuss the minimum
I
wage is
want
separate docket.
retail to fail because right now the only way it supposedly works is by screwing over everybody, so they need to have 2 and 3 jobs. And I just a few years ago I had to work 2 and 3 jobs to make like $1,000 a month.
My
And
cousin who works retail works like from 8 or 7 or 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. and barely makes enough to pay rent.
yeah, so I wouldn't want to put kids in these situations until the culture changed, but that I'll admit has nothing to do with the law. But
I
I
think
wouldn't
other
want to
people are talking about like back jobs, like stocking.
Yeah,
stalking. I suppose I
small
could see
objects.
stalking to yeah, I suppose I could see stalking to a certain degree. Um I still would not be of the mentality of we should let them be paid less because of that. Now, I think Ray had mentioned that would theoretically only they'd be paid uh, less for a certain period of time until they knew how to do it.
90
Um,
days.
yeah, 90
90
days. So
calendar days.
here's a question I want to ask the both of you. Exactly how young are we going here? Because let me see. I grew up in New York. I don't know what the law is is how early you can start working in
I think it's
Florida,
13 or 14
but
across the
in
board.
okay, so in New York, it was 16. And um how much younger than that should we go? Do you guys think?
So let me answer this in another way, and I'll get back to the main point.
Okay.
I have friends who have kids, and
Yeah.
one thing that those kids are always asking for is a little bit of money so that they can go and have fun with their friends.
Mhm.
And I have heard these stories going back for years. If kids don't know the value of money, they get spoiled and they can kind of waste it. Happens very easily. What usually happens is the parents try to teach the kids the value of money by paying them a little bit of money to do jobs around the house or mow lawns or whatever, kind of the example I gave earlier. Basically, the only person that most of these kids can go to hire them, turn a little bit of money so that they can get that little bit of spending money to do things with their friends, is with their parents or to kind of start up a small business like mowing the lawn or something.
Mhm.
So
Or
the
if
go ahead.
I was gonna say, or if your parents work for somebody that would be willing to hire you.
Exactly. So we're talking about, in my mind, proportionality. When kids are really young, they don't want $30 to be able, or whatever, $30 an hour or $15 an hour to be able to do what they want. They want $5 that week to go and do something with their friends. As they get older, they need more money and their ambitions get larger and the things that they want to do cost more. But it might vary based on the amount of work that they're doing, so they won't spend as much time doing work. They might only work a tiny bit when they're young. The work might not be as serious. Maybe they're helping somebody do like online advertising, make bad ads, whatever, something silly. But you can start them a lot earlier if you lower your ambitions. So I'm saying build kids up so that they can get a little bit of money for the stupid things that they want to do as a kid, and then they can get more money later on and more money later on when they finally get up to the point where they can work in a retail job. Then they're comfortable doing so, and they know exactly how much they're being paid because they've worked for that money already, because they have experience, and they'll be able to demand a higher pay when they get there because they can show that they've been working for years already. And they'll be able to show their parents that they know the value of money when they say, hey, can I have $5 to go do something with my friends? And maybe it's like, hey, after they've done that a couple times this week, they start realizing, oh yeah, like $5 is a lot of money, a lot more than I thought it was. And then you have kids who like spend an absolute ton of money on mobile games and stuff because they think you just buy something to get the next thing, not realizing that that actually costs something, a lot of time and effort on their parents' part. If kids understood the value of money, that wouldn't be happening. And if kids had their own money to put into the game, the parents wouldn't have to just give them money to educate them or basically to babysit them.
That's how my dad taught me, because that's how he was taught.
Yeah.
That's why he started having me work for him. He opened me my own bank account with the bank we use, and every week he would deposit like $20, $30 into the account, or he would just buy me something with his money because he couldn't figure out how to log in.
Yeah. So this is kind of going back to the education idea, but it's a different type of education. Like, on the one hand, you have work education, but this is like work ethic, and it's about the value of money, and it's something that all kids need to learn, and the earlier they learn it, the better. They don't need to learn it hard young, but at least getting a taste for it saves you a lot of problems as a family.
I was going to say, and as to your what age, Brawny, I think that the age that they start asking you for money for things might be an appropriate age to start having them do chores. And then as they get older, have them start doing yard work and stuff like that. And yes, I know yard work can be dangerous. Trust me, I've stuck my hand on a running lawnmower. It was not my brightest of moments.
Yeah, so here's the thing, gentlemen. I totally agree with all of that mentality. My sole concern was, when it scales up, do we regress into child exploitative labor? I learned all the same things when I was a kid. Like I said, I started working when I was 14. I've been working at least 2 jobs ever since. I get all of that. I've also gone several days without eating at a time on more than one occasion because for some reason, minimum wage doesn't stack up. And I just couldn't imagine putting a kid through that. And yeah, those were my concerns there. What can we do? What can things like this do different? Apprenticeships or work study programs, how would they be different from just having a similar sort of course in like middle school or high school or something like that?
Well, for one of my points here is, hey, lots of kids have these options in limited access. But part of what I'm asking for is, hey, what if we open things up? We allowed more competition, more options. So it wasn't just, hey, you go to your parents and you accept whatever deal they offer. Or you go to the one person who's allowed to hire you and you accept their deal. What if you have more options? What if you go to your parents and they say, I'll give you $1 for this, but then you go over to your neighbor and you say, no, that's worth $50. You clean up, you do the dusting, you clean up my house, $50 per hour or whatever. Like
per day or whatever, yeah.
Yeah, per day, whatever. The point is, as you get more options, you get more freedom and you get less problems, not more.
Okay.
You're saying, oh, if there are more opportunities to cause trouble, we're going to have more trouble, all right. They're going to bring it. The kids just don't have to do it. They can go to an alternative.
And I was gonna say, and as for the exploiting the kids, if we were gonna do this, there would need to be more strenuous rules in place to ensure companies didn't and enforced too. Don't just say you're gonna have those laws and don't enforce them.
Now, I know that recently, I think it was Kentucky, opened more opportunities for this type of education that you're talking about, Chuckly. It was funny because when I saw it in the news, the headline was something to the effect of Kentucky just made child labor legal or something like that.
Yeah.
And of course, people who only read the headline were furious.
Yeah, and then you'll see the same issue come up for the alternative president or the alternative party, and suddenly it'll be like the exact opposite take. Like we've seen this 1,000 times over. It just matters which side they're on.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that law. I think I saw something about it. I think when I looked into it, it was just a bunch of fluff from the actual like it was a fluff article. It didn't actually explain what happened. So I didn't trust it.
Yeah, and another thing is that with the laws as they are now, when you're working 14, 15 years old, you can only work so long. 18 hours total in a week, 3 hours on a school day, and 8 hours on a non-school day.
Yeah, it's not like they can ask for overtime. It's not like they can fudge the timesheet and force you to work extra time because, hey, you just working that off hours, you get fired. They'll actually run into trouble then.
Yeah, and then with 16 and 17-year-olds, they can only work, 5 hours on a school day and no more than 30 hours.
Okay. And you know something? I literally just had a thought
work
that
past 10 p.m.
I literally just had a thought that blows most of the arguments that I made tonight completely out of the water, in that all of my concerns were basically boiling down to whether or not it would open the door for companies to be exploitative towards children. But you know something, that's more of a that brings more of like a criminal element into it. And the thing about criminals is that it doesn't really matter what the law is; they're gonna do it anyway. So,
I was gonna say it's probably being done a lot, and we don't know about it. Haven't you heard the allegations against Disney?
Yeah, I have.
Child labor. Okay.
Apparently, they've got kids working at their parks.
Interesting.
Like how
in a
young?
good way or a bad way?
50-50.
Okay.
Okay, so for those who don't know, fill us in on what you do know.
I don't know much. I know that Disney has had allegations of having kids working in the back end of the park, where they can't be seen and everything. And
how young are these kids, and what kind of work are they doing?
That's also kind of, to be clear, the kind of work that we suggested earlier for retail. Keep them away from the idiotic customers. Have them doing stuff like stocking.
They're not doing that to keep them away from the customers for that reason, though. See, that's the difference. They're doing it because they don't want them to know they're exploiting the child labor. I mean, because if you haven't heard, kids go missing at the park every day and they're not found. People assume they've been kidnapped, and people are accusing Disney of kidnapping them to force them to work for them.
That sounds like a conspiracy theory to me, man.
It could very well be.
That's way crazier than I expected that to be.
It very well could be just a conspiracy theory, but there are a lot of accusations against it too.
Right. I would need to see some harder evidence, though. Like what I expected this to be is, hey, we've got 13-year-olds running forklifts back here. And we just sort of
maybe nothing as crazy as that.
And we did well. What you said is way crazier than a 13-year-old could potentially be trained to run a forklift. It's not advisable. I don't think I'd do it, but it could be done. If I can drive a tractor at 14, I'm sure. And I was
driving a tractor at 6.
Yeah, exactly. So
just imagining the story here. Disney, on one hand, is a company way more concerned with their reputation than any other company on the earth. Also, the most exploitative child labor hidden behind the scenes on earth is a wild take. Like,
kidnapping kids to force them to work. It's
that
is next level.
Nothing has been proven concrete. It's just accusations.
Yeah, okay. Ooh, that was something else there, man.
Not on my 5x5 bingo card for this debate.
No, not at all. The freaking that's what I and what I was expecting is they had like kids that were just too young, working heavy machinery, and maybe they fudged the paperwork a little bit, or maybe they just slipped some money to an inspector to look the other way. Those are things that I could very easily believe without any evidence. But kidnapping the kids to put them to work,
as I said, it's accusations that I haven't very well dived into much yet.
Alrighty then. Well, if you
let's
ever
save
find
that
anything,
off for another debate.
Yeah, if you ever find anything, please show me, because listen, that would be what causes me to burn down Disney, which I've been wanting to do anyway for a long time.
I was gonna say, and the writer's strike hasn't.
No, listen, I've wanted to burn down Disney since the 1940s, okay? And Rusty Helm says Disney is the Illuminati confirmed. What, you didn't already know that? I mean, I knew that.
Brony has mastered time travel in order to get back at Disney.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, you are not that old, Brawny.
That's how he can claim to be sold, I'm sure. Time travel.
I'm as old as I freaking need to be for the bit. That's how my age works, okay? My ethnicity works the same way. I am whatever is convenient for me in the moment.
Fair enough.
Yeah, okay, that's why I use the frickin' Pony Sona. It gives me plausible deniability. At least for the next hour and a half until I upload my Everfree Northwest announcement video and show my ugly frickin' mug on it. Christopher Jones calling me out.
Back to the child labor laws.
Right. So what else you got for me?
I mean, even with those just being accusations, there's no guarantee. Again, they're just accusations.
Let's change topics, please.
I'm going to.
Okay.
But with it being like that, there isn't really anything stopping criminals that if they're going to exploit a child, whether the law says they can, can't, or can, or, can or can't, they're going to do it.
Yeah.
Companies already do that to adults. That you might have worked 150 hours a week, and they're going to say, no, you only worked 20. They're going to fudge it. Now, they're going to get in a lot of trouble when caught. A lot of trouble.
That is an additional point there. It's like, yeah, if they're going to do it, they're going to do it. I don't want them to be able to get away with it.
Oh, yeah. When they get caught, it's going to be bad. Companies get fined lots of money. They have to pay back all that. So, like, if you work 80 hours in 1 week and they said you only worked 60 and you worked there for a year and they did that for every week in that entire year, they have to pay you that 20 hours a week at your overtime pay for that entire year.
Mm-hmm.
For every employee they did that to. Plus, they're going to get fined up their asses for violating labor acts and stuff. Stealing time, not paying you. Same thing's going to go for children, except they're more likely to get arrested.
Got it.
In general, the more public and easier to do something publicly something is, the less problems you're going to have. They won't have any ability or incentive to do things privately, and anybody who would be avoiding doing it publicly for good reasons won't have to do it. They'll do it publicly because there won't be any reasons to do it privately.
Exactly.
Privately, I mean like, hey, I'd have to pay too many taxes on this or pass too many regulations to do this publicly, so I'll do it under the table. Like, we've had friends pay other people, like their friends, to do things under the table. But if it was easier to hire somebody with regards to taxes or employment laws, they just would have done it publicly and not worried about under the table. It's the same thing. It's the same thing with kids. The easier it is to do it publicly, the less there's going to be private, like under the table, and the less problems there are going to be. So if we're worried about essentially a black market for child labor, the best thing to do is to make it easier to do. To make it easier to hire them normally rather than in a weird way with extra rules, and then you won't have like a bunch of people hiring them under the table and then exploiting them to get around the public laws.
Exactly. It goes back to so many debates. If you just stop making it, or maybe had the laws to allow it in a way that if they did something wrong, it's going to be very bad. They're not going to do the things wrong because they can do it this way anyways. And it's just going to be easier. Now, granted, there are always going to be people that don't care. They want to break the law to break the law. They cause chaos for the sake of chaos. But you'll get so many more that are going to follow the law because now they see the law. It's so much easier to obey the law than it is to do it under the table.
Yeah.
I can confirm from first-hand experience that for the most part I follow the law out of convenience.
Yeah.
And it's cheaper to follow the law because if you're gonna do it under the table, you're gonna the people that you have to keep quiet. They're gonna be like, you're gonna have to pay them a lot to keep quiet. You have to pay inspectors to look the other way, and it's just gonna cost you more money.
Yeah.
Than the taxes are if it's going to be a free.
So, do we want to add anything else to this, or should I get into audience participation?
I want to go to audience participation.
All right.
Same. I want to see what our friends have to say.
Oh, we've got a lot of good ones here. Harriman was saying at the beginning, I was helping my father deliver furniture at 14, and I'm better for it. Child labor laws are far too strict and make it impossible to get younger teens into working, so they have a harder time learning the value of money and a proper work-life balance. And I already said a few minutes ago, yeah, I get that. I was working at 14 too. You know, something I don't like though is I don't like going into, and I'm going to say it, I've only seen this at Chinese restaurants where there's like a 10-year-old working the cash register. I think that's too young. I don't think a 10-year-old should be working a cash register. I think a 10-year-old should be playing with other 10-year-olds.
That goes back to the you can employ your children thing, right?
Right.
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't think a 10-year-old should be working the cash register or doing service or anything like that. But, you know, there's not much you can have them do asides the cash register. You know, it's easier to teach them how to handle the money and put it in the register than it is to teach them how to cook in the back, you know?
A lot of these ethnic restaurants, also hotels, gas stations, the reason why they're run by families like this is because that's how they can get immigration into the US. And the reason why they're having the child run it is because they're running on thin margins in order to survive.
Exactly. Like hotels usually don't have to worry about that because they can place the child into housekeeping and have them clean rooms. Where they're not seen as much. I mean, I've seen a couple of hotels where they've looked very young working as a housekeeper.
I've never seen that myself, but if I saw a 12-year-old with a you know, running a vacuum as part of housekeeping at a hotel, I'd be raising some serious eyebrows and probably asking some serious questions.
Well, I said hotel, but I meant motel. and most of these are not hotels or motels that you and I would be staying at.
Yeah.
Unless it was like that really cheap one that we stayed up in like Tallahassee.
Yeah,
I was
remember
gonna say
that
it's
one.
gonna be a really cheap one. Trust me, it was. And but the kid said she enjoyed it. You know, she was a Hispanic child. I asked her. I said, "You like doing this?" She said, "Yeah, I love cleaning."
Nice.
All right.
So I said,
I guess
"Okay."
to a certain degree, that's all that matters. Zeus Assassin said, would children be tax exempt from their income? I've been looking forward to this. Here's what I think. Yes. If you can't vote, last I checked, right, the whole reason this country exists is no taxation without representation. So if you're not voting, you should not be taxed. By the same token, convicts should not be taxed either. In
I have a whole
my
separate
opinion.
problem with convict and vote and law.
Yeah,
and
I don't necessarily think that convicts should, like, I don't think you should. I can't off the top of my head think of a situation where you should lose your voting rights for a conviction. I'm sure a reasonable one exists. I can't think of one off the top of my head.
I can go into them, but I'm not going to do it on your stream.
Yeah.
Yes.
So the point is, as it is right now, if you get convicted of a felony, and you lose your voting rights, and I don't think that's right. But if we're gonna do that, fine. I no longer have a say in the government. The government doesn't get to tax me.
I agree with that. As for the child taxing for children, I don't think you should be able to tax a child's wages, personally. So yeah, they should be tax exempt because they're not working to help the government. They're not, they're paying enough taxes by buying the things they want, like games and stuff. I think you should just let them have that money. You're already paying them less.
In fact,
get rid of the income tax in general, and all my arguments would apply to kids as well as adults.
Yeah, no taxes in general. Just get rid of it. If there are any IRS agents listening to this show, you are subhuman.
If I had to have
taxes. IRS agents listening to this show, they are not human. Not just subhuman. They are not human, in my opinion. They are not people.
If I had to have taxes,
they're only doing it because they have to. Now, if they're only doing it because they have to and they don't like it, you're better, but you're still not human. Not until you quit.
So if you're an IRS agent, you are for some reason being coerced into being an IRS agent, and you wish to no longer be, and you wish to regain your humanity, type cannoli in the comments. I don't know. It was the first thing that came to my head. Chuckly, what were you saying?
Even if they type it cannoli in the comments, they're still not human until they quit their jobs.
Well, yeah, that's right. And then the NSA is going to get them. We got to get rid of the NSA too. Chuckly, what were you trying to say?
So I would have a different tax structure completely, not based on income taxes at all. Part of the reason why we created the income tax was just because governments wanted to raise a whole lot more money than they had beforehand, and
now they have it.
Individual people can't defend against it.
Yeah.
I
have my own problems with the income tax. I think income tax itself should be done away with. And I do, like, taxing people for their work. Okay, that's stupid. They've earned that money, and you're gonna tax them, and then say you're gonna give it back, and then you don't really give it back to them.
So let's table this for a future debate.
Yes.
Alrighty then. Rusty Helm says, what about jobs, and he put jobs in quotes, is in small business that are low risk to the child's health. We've sort of talked about this a little bit. At what age can a child do what? I'm hearing a lot about 8 and 9-year-olds, but what about 12, 14, etc.? So yeah, there's certainly, I wouldn't, here's the thing. I don't think anybody I think 14 is like the limit, for as young as you should go. I think at a certain point, below that, if you're spending your time working, you're probably missing out on developmental milestones that are more important socially than a few extra bucks in your wallet or any of that, for that matter.
And that's why for at least 14, 15-year-olds and 16, 17-year-olds, they're only allowed to work so much and for so long. And I totally agree with that, though. But like at the same time, if you own a small business and your kid, brother, sister, niece, nephew, grandchild wants to help you out, let them help you out, but make sure that they are also being social and stuff. You
Yeah,
know,
which is a really tough, thing to.
doesn't matter what age they are. If they're not 8 or 9, give them something simple to do, like placing books on a bookshelf or something. If they're 11, 12 years old, have them helping people find things if they need help, or they're available. 14, 15 years old, again, same thing, stalking or helping people. Once you reach 16, 17 years old, 18 years old, that's when you need to have a bit of a backbone to work at the register, because people are going to yell at you all the time.
Right. Now, I've mentioned, how young I was when I started working, and I've always had at least 2 jobs and something like that, but this is where I'm coming from with the developmental, milestone thing. I didn't have much of a social life when
Yeah,
I
neither
was
did I.
when I was a teenager. I was when I was at school, and then I went to work, and then I trained, and then I came home, and I usually like threw myself into some sort of either writing or photography project I had going for myself.
My issue
And
was
I worked to fund my training in karate because my parents couldn't do that for me. But I didn't make any friends there. I don't know. I don't really have any regrets about it, but at the same time, sometimes you wonder what you missed.
There
my
are
issue.
job options where you can be more social. Like
Yeah.
a lot of your karate type programs, like Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts, will raise money as a group for their group. And
Mm-hmm.
hey, that's essentially a job. They're taking that child's labor because they don't have any other options. But
But
hey, the
they
kids
always
get to
offer
be social.
incentives. They always offer incentives, like being able to go to camp, or for Boy Scouts they offer prizes for selling, and Girl Scouts for selling so much popcorn / Girl Scout cookies.
Yeah, it's basically to get around the child labor laws.
Yeah. And like I said, for me, I was antisocial too, but it wasn't so much as because I was working and gaming and all that stuff. It was because I went to a private Christian academy, and I just didn't click with anyone there because of my hobbies.
Mm.
Once I started moving on to my high school that I graduated from, I was a lot more social, and I was working still.
Yep. Let's see here. Zeus again with another one says if you're going to demonstrate extreme outcomes, you need to provide solid evidence to back up that claim. Otherwise, you come off as a fearmonger. This is in reference to when I was, talking about that I no longer believe that slippery slope is a fallacy because I've seen it. So here's um he's sort of got half of a point on me in this one, in that we don't really have an example of the slippery slope in terms of child labor laws. What we do have is a historical context that, given the opportunity, uh, giant corporations will create monopolies and exploit children legally if they're allowed to do so. So that was my thing there. Since we reformed the labor laws to include child labor laws and things like that, we don't really have that anymore. Where I have seen the slippery slope no longer become a fallacy is mostly in LGBT issues, where in 2005 it was just like we want to be able to get married, which was I believed was a completely separate issue. And back then, everybody made fun of the Christians for going, oh, everybody made fun of the Christians for saying things like, oh, well, then we'll have to allow for pedophilia and bestiality. And nowadays, we get people unironically vouching for pedophilia and bestiality on the back of the LGBT movement. So that was why I no longer believe in the term slippery slope fallacy. That wasn't even a slope; it was a freaking cliff. We fell off the
I was
cliff.
gonna say
in
that
less
was
than a
the slow. They hopped in a Ferrari and drove as fast as that thing
That
could
wasn't a
go off a
slippery
cliff.
slope. That was the Superman at Six Flags.
No, that was Superman just taking a deep dive back to Earth.
You know what I mean, right? Superman at Six Flags. It's a
Yeah.
giant roller coaster. Drops you at a 90-degree angle.
At like 250 miles an hour. At least that's what it feels like.
So in comparison, we do have some of the problems, some of the worries that you had. It tends to be in poorer countries right now, because in those poorer countries, the children actually need to make money in order to live. As you get into richer countries, those problems become significantly less of a problem. And if the kids are working, it's probably going to be better for them to work here, even if it's a terrible job, than if they can't work.
And usually the kids that do work want to work, you know?
So I don't think that the slippery slope issues that you had worries about are as much of a problem, partly because America has just gotten a lot more prosperous.
Yeah, so Zeus had a half point on me. For that. It's like, I'm comparing my experience with the slippery slope in other issues and applying them to a separate issue that it may not apply to. So he's got me there. But everything else I said still stands.
I was going to say at the same time, it's happened before in those other issues, so what's it to stop it from happening in this one?
And I was saying partly the economy.
Clayton
Yeah.
Clayton Hess says labor and wage laws are entirely dependent on what U.S. state you live in. So that's an interesting one. As far as I know, I was speaking in a federal context the whole time. So applies to all 50 states, Puerto Rico, and Guam.
Yes, it applies to the Fair Labor Standards Act.
Yeah.
Some states have different rules, like that 425 might be higher in a state that has a higher minimum wage.
And I was kind of addressing this in a general philosophical way where, hey, we can address all of these states and federal and other potential issues which aren't necessarily laws together. Let's talk about them all together, but none of them specifically.
All right.
Exactly.
Paladin Pony T says, do you guys think that he types weird sometimes, lower these laws? Okay, so by lessening the laws would stop or lessen the use of kids in criminal elements. Now, there's a couple of different ways that question could be interpreted. Here's how I interpreted the question. I think he might mean, like, we do see kids that join gangs in very young ages, like, sometimes even preteens. And sometimes when that happens, there's a cultural element to it, but there's also just an economic opportunity element to it, and where everything is horrible and you have to fend for yourself at a young age, because probably your parents didn't. Then you end up in a gang. So if we give them an opportunity to work, we're taking them away from somewhere where they might fall into a gang in the wrong sort of subcultures. So I could see that. I think that would be a good thing. What do you gentlemen think?
We've got the gang angle. We also have what is currently called the human trafficking problem, where a lot of these like very young kids are being roped into like sex slaves or something.
Yeah.
And
they're being groomed. That's what the term is.
Yeah. And the more options that they have, the less likely that is to happen.
Well,
the more options that they have to...
groomed is something different. We're talking about just straight up being sold into sex slavery and raped.
Oh, being kidnapped and stuff. Yeah, definitely.
It is a range of different vices. And my
because
point
they'll
is...
actually be somewhere... Sorry to interrupt you. They'll actually be somewhere that can protect them, and their parents will have to pick them up from it, or they'll have a group of people that they're going to be with going home.
Well, part of my point there was that there is a range of ways that people get into that problem. Like, hey, some of those people need money and they do something on the side and then they get roped into it more and more through manipulation.
Yeah.
Not all of them have to be outright kidnapping. My point was that the more options the kids have, the less likely that is to happen, because they don't have to settle for essentially mafia loans. They can settle for reasonably public, healthy ways to earn money.
Alrighty then, and the last one that I had was from Vulpecula Einfeld, who wants to know why Ray would stick his hand in a running lawnmower.
Got to stop the blades.
I was trying to clean out the grass in it, and usually when I clean out the lawnmower while I'm running it, I let go of the handlebar that keeps it running, and my brain didn't miss the step where I let go, so as I'm trying to clean it out, I'm sticking my hand in the running lawnmower.
Oh jeez. This one time I had to unclog the lawnmower blades, and what did I do? I picked up a stick. And I carried it with me while I was riding the mower, and every time, because I had to mow this lawn while it was rainy and it was clogging it up. So, and every time it looked like it was getting clogged, I smacked the deck really hard with the stick and loosened up the wet grass that was stuck up in there, and then it sort of just kind of dumped it, and I was good for another 50 feet.
Yeah, I would usually just, after that, I started just slamming the thing into the, just smacking it against the ground to clean it out.
Mr. C. Vixen, which is a name I've never seen on this show before, so welcome. I hope you're enjoying yourself. Says,
yay, welcome to the show.
Yeah, lesson learned, disconnect the spark plug whenever you work on a mower.
Yep, there you go.
Now that one feels a little too far in the other extreme.
Yeah, like these guys are essentially trying to mow somebody's lawn, and then, because the lawn was overgrown or some other reason, they need to take a pause and then start mowing again. The pause might be to hit the lawnmower with a stick, lift it up and shake it around, whatever. You don't need to
Holy frick, if you can lift a lawnmower and shake it around,
you're Superman.
You should be in the bodybuilding competitions making your money that way.
Yeah, it varies very much based on type of lawnmower, how much a lawnmower weighs. I could pick up the lawnmower that I just sent you, or the one that I have in my house, over my head and toss it. Without me being a strong man.
Yeah.
Like, these things weigh less than 50 pounds, maybe less than, 30.
Okay, well, I was driving a zero turn.
Yeah.
I wasn't.
That's 1,000 pounds easy.
Nice, okay. Yeah, I'm not picking that up.
Yeah,
neither am I.
At least not without some leverage and simple machines.
I can pick up maybe 500, but that's pushing it.
500, God almighty, I can't pick up 500. There's no freaking way.
When I was lifting nearly 425.
Alrighty then. Big dude. Okay, so did either of you see any more chat that you wanted to address, or should we wrap this up?
I didn't see anything.
Zeus did make an earlier comment that I thought was interesting. It went back to the idea of working tech jobs. He said that he could probably train up somebody, and he works a good job, like a good job in tech or engineering. He could train up somebody with decent computer literacy to do his job.
Yeah, I did see that.
And that kind of goes back to my point. If we get some of these kids into good workplaces, working jobs like that, suddenly the workscape that they go into, looking at college education, looking at careers, changes significantly, because most of these kids think that world is not open to them. Like, decent computer education, but college education for the stuff that he's doing, really difficult. Like, they will kick out people by the hundreds out from a computer science or engineering discipline from UCF. And UCF is not the hardest school. But if somebody can go in there and realize, I can be doing that job, and the company doesn't have to be paying like me a full engineering educated because I didn't get the degree. But if they don't have to be paying him like that, they can be paying him like, hey, $20 an hour instead of $40 or $50 an hour, just estimates. Like suddenly he can be in the work, he can be earning a job, and he can be working his way up the ladder to be earning more later on.
Alrighty then. So in that case, I think this was a good conversation. I'm about ready to wrap it up. Mr. C. Vixen said that I've shown up a few other live streams, by the way. My memory is not nearly as good as it used to be, so hopefully, I've said hi to you before. But either way, I love the fact that you're here.
Well, they also said that they're kind of a lurker, which is fine.
Yeah, I'm sure I got a lot of people that are lurkers. Anyway, Ray, final thoughts on one thing you learned tonight.
Final thoughts, just, no matter what the country does, there's always gonna be people to find a way around what there is, what laws there are. But I did learn that, about, like, I knew about the minimum wage thing, but I did learn about, like, some older aspects of it from, like, when you were younger and stuff,
Mm-hmm. How about you, Chuckly?
So this is a little bit funny and ironic because I'm the one who suggested this debate, but I learned about what the actual problems are in the way. Like, Reis bring up his stories, bring up all of the, here's the ways that you're allowed to work as a kid and the ways that you're not. All that was kind of educating for me.
Mm-hmm. And I learned that my, fears of child labor laws being lessened and then exploited are not nearly as founded in reality as I probably initially thought they were at the beginning of the stream. So that's good. Things are not worst case scenario. If you guys are for everybody who tuned in, thank you very much for tuning in. Chuckly, thank you so much for suggesting the topic. Ray, thank you so much for joining me last minute here. We're very grateful to everybody who supports the channel, especially the $10 and up tier. If you'd like to get on the show, we'd love to have you. $1 a month. Check out those links in the description, as well as the links to everybody else in the $10 and up tier. Princess Heather Blossom, Shady Oak Ministry, Sid McConroy, Autoknight, Emerald Spencer, Senko, DJ, Rein-Kun, Pony Cordero, QFlash, Billy Henline, Alden, EasyModeGamer, Kanto Acrylic VA, Mr. Sonic 31, Ridge the Hedgehog, Alicia Lynette, Zeta Z, Sniper Nighter, Calvix, StarChaser, VentureCorp, Dark Malcontent, Executive Producer, Titan Art Studios. They all make some pretty good stuff too. If you are going to,
everyone donated Brawny $1, he could grow his hair back.
If everybody watching the stream right now donated me $1, I'd have $9 extra. That's a whole...
I meant everybody that follows you.
That is a whole large combo meal at Burger King.
I meant everybody that follows you, so subscribe.
Not Wendy's, though. Wendy's is too bougie for me.
If Brawny ever figured out how to grow his hair back, he'd tear it out the next day as he got upset at every single one of us.
And listen, Chuckly, I don't live on your living room floor anymore, watching you just put on every single horrible anime that ever existed. I'm not worried about that anymore, okay? I mean...
We'll find a way.
You better not find a way. I will put my hair on your head just so I can rip it off of you. Anyway, by the way, if you are going to Everfree Northwest next week, give me a bulk biceps, and we'll see you there. I've got a pretty light schedule. I've only got one panel going on at the convention this time. It's Brony Debates Live at 9:00 p.m. On Saturday night. So I hope
I want to come.
Yeah, I hope to see you all there. Brony Debates Live at a panel is interesting. It's always the same panel, but it's also never the same panel because there's always a different audience and it works off of the suggestions that they give. So it's always the same panel of where I sort of introduce the concept of debate and why it's an important skill to learn, and what's the best way to go about it, the mentality that you should have and things like that. And then we do a little thought, and then we do some thought experiments with those concepts. So it's always the same, but it's always different because we're always getting different things to talk about from the audience, and sometimes it's been serious.
You always got a lot. You got a lot more audience interaction.
Yeah, it's amazing. I freaking love doing it. So anyway, yeah, but I've got a pretty light schedule. I'm going to be hanging out with my friends, and I'm going to be doing that panel there. But if you see me walking around, please feel free to stop me and say hi. I love meeting you guys. We'll talk about anything you want to talk about. I love that kind of thing. Anyway, have a wonderful night. Stay safe. God bless. We will see you in a little over a half hour on Princess Heather Blossom's channel while she crochets. So yeah, and we're gonna hang out with the chat there. Have a wonderful night, everybody. Say good night.
Later, guys.